Some people make you tremble because of love, but there are others who make a narcissist tremble because you no longer love the way you used to. Welcome to Echoes of the Mind, where we peel back the layers of psychological masks with the light of awareness and insight. In today's video, you'll not only explore the chaotic inner world of a narcissist when confronted by someone who was once fragile but is now fully awakened, you'll also come to understand why your silence, your withdrawal, and your rebirth are the very silent nightmare they were never prepared to face. UHE. This video is presented as an educational analysis and commentary grounded in psychological perspectives from thinkers such as Carl Jung, with the purpose of raising awareness and fostering insight. It is not intended as a personal attack. All materials used are in compliance with fair use guidelines. Hit subscribe to stay connected with powerful insights into human behavior and psychology. And don't take your eyes off the screen, because the final moments of this video will reveal a truth that may change the way you forever see your past. Part 1. When control is no longer reality. Do you know what truly causes a narcissist to unravel? It's not when you leave in tears. It's not when you scream in pain. It's when you become still, completely, calmly, and unshakably still. Their collapse is not loud. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It crumbles slowly, like rotten foundations beneath a house that once seemed stable. They don't fear losing you, they fear losing their ability to control your emotions. For a narcissist, control isn't just a tactic, it's the core of their existence. They don't love you. They need you, like a mirror, to reflect back the distorted self-image they've constructed. You were once their emotional sponge, absorbing their rage, offering explanations, forgiveness, and tears. All of that served as emotional supply they fed off. But then, one day, you went silent. No arguments, no justifications, no pleading for understanding. And in that moment when you stepped outside their emotional orbit, their panic began. It's no longer you changing. It's them cracking from within. The masks they wore, held together by admiration and fear from others, start to fall away. They are no longer the charismatic one they believed themselves to be. They are now someone who must face the emptiness no one is willing to fill anymore. They used to read your emotions like a data sheet, every gesture, every reaction, a cue for manipulation. Now, that sheet is blank. No reaction, no resistance, no psychological games, only awareness. You no longer revolve around their world. You've built your own axis. And that self-possession, your quiet exit from their performance, leaves them disoriented. They may try to pull you back in, with anger, with apologies, with artificial pain. But none of it matters if you're no longer playing the role. You flip the board with a single move. You stop playing. To them, control is slipping away piece by piece. And that's not just a loss, it's an existential crisis. They don't know who they are without someone to control. And you've begun to walk out of the darkness, no warning, no revenge. Just absence. Part 2. When the stage loses its audience. A narcissist doesn't simply live with themselves. They need a stage, a story, and above all, an audience. You used to be that audience, the one who reacted, the one who forgave, the one who explained, the one who returned, no matter how many times you were hurt. To them, you weren't a person. You were a supporting role in a play where they were always the lead. But one day, something strange happened. You sat still. You stayed quiet. You didn't step back onto the stage. They kept performing their monologue. They used the same tired tricks, punishing silence, vague apologies, guilt-inducing anger. But this time, you didn't respond. You didn't cry. You didn't fight. You simply weren't in the theater anymore. And that is what began to dismantle their entire psychological framework. When you stop reacting, they don't just lose control. They lose their starring role. No more opposition for them to play the victim. No more suffering for them to play the savior. No more eyes seeking approval. They are left to face a truth too painful to bear. No one is watching anymore. And for an ego fed by attention, that is a spiritual death. You didn't scream, "I'm done." You didn't accuse them. You didn't expose them publicly. You simply weren't there anymore, no longer the mirror they used to see themselves through. They may say you've changed. Hespru. They may accuse you of being cold, but what they're really saying is, I can't control you anymore. And for them, loss of control isn't just a setback. It's the end of their world. They flail. They act out the final scenes with familiar expressions. But you've already left the stage. No anger, no tears. Just one step back, a step that rewrote your fate. You're no longer part of their script. And when a performance loses its audience, the only thing left on stage is a lonely actor performing out of habit, no longer believing in the role they once demanded others to believe in. This isn't revenge, it's liberation. And that silence, that departure without a sound, is the most profound psychological strike you could ever deliver. Not to hurt them, but to heal yourself. Part 3. When you stop reacting, the game ends. There's one truth: a narcissist will never admit that all of their power comes from your reactions. Their control doesn't exist in themselves. It exists in how you respond to their words, their behavior, their calculated disappearances. When you get angry, they win. When you explain, they win. When you cry, they win even more. But then one day, you stop reacting. Not because you no longer feel, but because you've seen enough to understand. Your reactions are the fuel they use to rewrite the story in their favor. You realize that every time you try to clear things up, you're just giving them more space to twist the narrative. And your tears, they're not wake-up calls to them. They're props for their next performance as the misunderstood victim. So you stop. You pull your energy back into yourself. You don't explain. You don't defend. You no longer need to be understood. To an emotionally healthy person, that might look like a quiet act of self-preservation. But to a narcissist, it's a catastrophe. Because now, they can't read you anymore. They once viewed you as a control panel of emotions. Every reaction, a signal that told them what role to play next. But now that control panel has gone silent, and the game is over. They scramble. They cycle through old tactics. Passive-aggressive silence, vague texts like, "Are you okay?" Even fake happy photos with someone new, just to see if you'll flinch. But you're no longer playing. You're not the one trying to be understood anymore. You're the one who understands. And from that moment on, you're no longer a pawn on the board they laid out. You're the person who left the game entirely. To a narcissist, your reactions are the lifeblood of their power. And by withdrawing them, you've cut off the supply completely. They can't provoke feelings in you anymore. They can't ignite your rage. They can't trap you in their cycles of emotional chaos. And so they spiral. You don't need to prove you're right. You just need to stay silent. And in that silence, something powerful happens. You're no longer the object of the game. You become the boundary they can never cross again. Part 4. When silence becomes the highest form of power. Some battles are won without a single scream. Some victories require no weapons, no strategy. Just silence, offered at the right time and in the right place. And to a narcissist, there is nothing more terrifying than someone they can no longer make react. You were once the one who said, "I'm sorry," to save the relationship, even when you didn't know what you'd done wrong. You were the one who typed out long messages explaining why you felt hurt, only to be met with blank stares or one-word replies. You argued in desperation, thinking if you just made enough sense, they'd finally understand. But then you stopped, not because you were weak, but because you'd grown strong enough to see that silence isn't running away. It's a boundary. It's the unspoken declaration. I'm not playing this game anymore. And to a narcissist, that silence is an earthquake. They survive by poking at wounds, by drawing reactions to feel alive. They need you to speak, to cry, to react, anything to prove you're still in orbit. But now, all they hear is emptiness. You're no longer shouting back, not defending, not begging for apology or understanding. You're simply no longer available for emotional engagement. And in that silence, they don't hear you. They hear the echo of their own hollow ego, the quiet collapse of their illusion of control, the confusion of not knowing what you think, what you feel, or why you're so damn calm. Your silence is the highest form of awakening. It's not repressed anger. It's clarity forged through suffering. It's the moment you realize you don't need anyone to get you. You just need to know yourself well enough that no one else's validation matters. To someone who once controlled you through rage, silence, and psychological games, now they are completely lost. No reaction to exploit, no emotion to feed off, no door left to sneak into your mind. You haven't disappeared. You're more present than ever, just in a way they can no longer own. And in the world of someone who needs dominance to feel alive, the inability to own you is what makes them feel weaker than they've ever been. Part 5. When an apology is a calculated strategy, don't be swayed by the tears that come after you've already stood up. Don't be moved by the apologies that only appear once you're strong enough not to need them anymore. Because in the world of a narcissist, remorse is not an awakening, it's a strategy. A final move disguised as growth, just to see if there's still a soft spot in your heart they can squeeze through. They say they're changing. They've been to therapy. They've realized how much you mean to them. You'll hear lines like, "I know I hurt you deeply. You're the only one who ever made me want to be better." But ask yourself, where were those words on the nights you cried yourself to sleep? When silence was used as punishment? When all you needed was an ounce of clarity? Those words only arrive once you've stopped waiting for them. And that's the point. They don't apologize because they understand. They apologize because they no longer have control. You might ask, what if they've truly changed? But true change never shows up as a grand speech after you've already walked away. Real change doesn't use sorrow as a ticket back into your heart. It shows up in respectful silence, consistent actions, and no expectations of reward. But this is a performance, a role they've written based on what they know about you. Your compassion, your belief in redemption, your hope that maybe, just maybe, they could become the person you once dreamed they'd be. Now they wear that costume, not because they've become that person, but because they know it's the only version that might make you hesitate. If you're not fully awakened, you may confuse performance with transformation. You'll think this is the happy ending after the pain. But in truth, it's a psychological illusion. One final strike aimed at the last flicker of hope inside you. They didn't return to rebuild. They came back to test, are you still easy to manipulate? They're not seeking forgiveness. They're looking for a forgotten door. One they can slip through wearing the costume of the wounded and restart the same cycle under a new spotlight. The light of fake healing. But you, if you're truly awakened, don't need to say no. You just need to stand still, unaffected by the soft voice of someone who only seems to love you. When they can no longer control you. Part 6. When you become the mirror they can't bear to face. When you stop reacting, you don't disappear. You don't become invisible. On the contrary, you become a mirror so clear, the person facing it can no longer hide, not even from themselves. And to a narcissist, this is the most dangerous phase. When you no longer respond, they are forced to look inward, something they've avoided their entire life. You no longer argue. You no longer try to make things clear. End clue. You don't send midnight texts explaining why you're hurt. You simply exist, silent, grounded, radiant with inner power. The calm in your eyes confuses them more than any rage ever did. Because they can't read you anymore. They can't control you anymore. They can't flick your emotions like a light switch. You're no longer the victim, nor the savior. You're just you, a version that no longer needs adjusting to feel worthy. And that's when the truth begins to surface. Not from your mouth, but from within them. No one left to blame. No one left to manipulate. They look at you, the one they used to label predictable, sensitive, too forgiving, and they see something terrifying. You're awake. You've stepped out of their emotional orbit. You don't need to shout that you've changed. Your strength speaks for itself. You don't need to prove you're different. They can feel it in your silence. A silence not born from emptiness, but from wholeness. You don't need to fight to reclaim your dignity. You reclaimed it the moment you let go. And for a narcissist, that hurts more than any confrontation, because they once had power over you simply by keeping you from walking away. But now they see a version of you that they can't reach, not with charm, not with guilt, not with shame. You've become their greatest fear, living proof that they no longer have power. Yes, they may find someone new, a new supply, but there will always be a fracture where you once stood, not because you left, but because you left with your wholeness intact. No bitterness, no revenge, just a presence so calm it reflects everything false that remains in them. You don't need to look back, because you've become something they can never forget. Not because you hurt them, but because you woke up. Part 7. When memory becomes a weapon and silence turns into bait. Don't assume that their silence means they've let you go. On the contrary, silence is their final trump card. When every other tactic has failed, anger, pleading, blame, fake epiphanies, they shift to a more subtle form of assault, targeting your memories. No more messages. No more, let's talk one last time. They vanish, but it's a strategic disappearance. They know you're sensitive enough to feel energy, deep enough to hear the echo of what isn't said. And they use that as a reverse doorway, quiet but precise. Suddenly you hear an old song. A message pops up from a mutual friend. A random image appears on social media, seemingly accidental, seemingly unintentional. But deep inside, something stirs. A piece of memory reawakens. A wave of old emotions rushes in. That's the plan. When they can't reach you through action, they reach you through your mind. They don't need to step into your life again. They just need to step into your thoughts to replant the seed of doubt. Was I too cold? Maybe they really have changed. Could this be the second chance I'm missing? But here's what you must remember. Those memories are not proof of love. They are the residue of prolonged manipulation. You don't miss them because they were good. You miss them because they once made you forget who you were. And now that you've healed, they no longer seek to control you with power, but with the doubt you feel about yourself. This is the final strike, making you question whether your strength is actually cruelty. Making you return not out of love, but out of a need for closure. But closure has already happened long ago. You owe no one a final conversation to move on. You don't need one last confrontation to walk forward. True closure doesn't need a stage. It only needs clarity. They're not coming back because they love you. They're coming back because they still believe you haven't truly let go. Don't let their silence become bait for old echoes. Because if you return this time, it's no longer them manipulating you. It's you betraying yourself. When you no longer belong to their game, you are free. No one truly escapes a narcissistic relationship just by walking away. Physical distance is only the first step. The real liberation happens in every thought, in every moment, when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself, when you no longer carry guilt for simply living your truth. The narcissist may no longer be by your side, but they still exist, in memories, in the sense of something missing, in the urge to get proper closure. And that's the most dangerous part. Because they don't need to be physically present to manipulate you, they only need to make you question yourself. And that is where you must be stronger than ever. The truth is, you are not heartless. You are not cold. You are simply someone who has stepped out of an emotional whirlwind you were trapped in for far too long. You don't need to explain anything to anyone. You don't need validation. Because true freedom doesn't need an audience. It only needs you. They may continue spinning their version of the story, casting themselves as the one who was abandoned, the victim of your indifference. They may sway others to doubt you, to make you feel alone. But remember this: solitude is not always a loss. Sometimes it is sacred space, where you are reborn. You didn't win by arguing. You won with silence, by stopping, by no longer playing a game you never signed up for. And that is the power no manipulator can stand. Someone who was once broken now walks away without hatred. Someone who was once controlled no longer reacts. Someone who was once emotionally manipulated now commands their own emotions. If you are on this journey, or just beginning to feel that awakening inside, trust that you are not alone. There are millions walking this path with you, and Echoes of the Mind is here to walk beside you every step of the way. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any healing, insightful, and psychologically rich content like this. The recovery journey isn't easy, but you don't have to walk it alone. Every video will be a shard of light, guiding you, reminding you, you deserve freedom. You deserve peace. Choose yourself. Every time.